They don't break in. They're already inside. That's what makes them dangerous. Not the blood, not the body count, but the silence between the knock and the scream. The FBI's 5 most wanted serial killers aren't ghosts. They're architects. Each one of them has designed a method so meticulous, so untraceable, that entire cities have learned to live with the fear of their footsteps. And first on that list, the man the Bureau only refers to as the locksmith has been vanishing into homes for over 15 years, leaving no broken windows, no forced entry, and no survivors. They say he only strikes when the lights go out, that he watches from the inside before he kills, that he's already picked the next family before the headlines even run. The locksmith's first confirmed kill was in Clearwater, Florida in 2009. A family of 4 was found in their single-story home, all dead, all laid out in their beds, covered to the shoulders like they'd never been touched. There were no signs of struggle, no alarms triggered, and nothing stolen. What caught the investigators off guard was a faint metallic smell in each room, like freshly oiled tools. At first, the deaths were ruled a bizarre murder-suicide, but then it happened again, then again. Jacksonville, Memphis, Tulsa, Columbus, all within 3 years, always at night, always whole families, always locked from the inside. And in every case, the only sign of forced entry was the lock itself, which had been opened, manipulated, and perfectly reset. No damage, just clean, professional access. That's when the Bureau knew they weren't looking for a typical killer. They were hunting someone who understood locks better than the people who installed them. A former prison contractor first raised the alarm when he noticed a striking pattern in the lockwork. Each deadbolt had been bypassed using an identical method involving a rare European torsion bar technique. Not even most locksmiths would know how to do it. That's how he got his name, the locksmith. But it wasn't just the break-ins that disturbed agents. It was what he left behind. At every scene, investigators found a small, square piece of paper inside the heating vent, folded 4 times. No note, no message, just one symbol. A hollow key drawn in graphite. The edges were burned, and the paper had been handled with gloved precision, always placed exactly 33 inches from the floor. That kind of ritual pointed to a methodical profile, someone with military or correctional system experience, deeply intelligent, obsessively neat. They began digging into past employees of high-security facilities, hundreds of suspects, dozens with records, but no match. Then, in 2016, the locksmith vanished for 5 years. No killings, no signs, no noise. The Bureau thought he was dead, retired, arrested under another charge, until last year, a family in Amarillo, Texas, was found in the exact same configuration. Each bed made, each body cold, each lock flawless. The graphite symbol was back. And this time, it was drawn in the child's coloring book, hidden under a loose floorboard in her bedroom. The FBI now believes the locksmith may be working off a personal code, targeting specific blueprints, perhaps even striking based on census data or school records. His victims span all races, income levels, and neighborhoods, but they all share one thing: no history with law enforcement. Quiet, unnoticed families, off the radar, like he wants to erase lives that no one else is watching. What makes him even harder to catch is that he leaves no DNA, no fingerprints, no cameras triggered. He's careful with heat sensors. He understands floor pressure and even pet behavior, often killing the family dog or cat without signs of struggle or sound. That level of control suggests surveillance, weeks, maybe months of planning. And the Bureau believes he's still active. They suspect he's now altering his patterns, possibly living in mobile housing, choosing homes based on access points or weak alarm systems. Some believe he's a former prison escapee. Others believe he's a contractor who builds high-end homes and uses that access to plan years in advance. But one thing is certain: the locksmith doesn't just kill, he studies. And when he strikes, it's already too late. Families die in their sleep. not in horror, but in total silence. And by morning, he's gone. The locks are fixed, the sheets are tucked, and the house is still warm with yesterday's life. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit classifies the locksmith as a Tier 1 covert killer, someone whose skill set mirrors special operations tactics or elite-level contractors, except he doesn't leave missions behind. He creates them. According to internal reports leaked through a whistleblower in 2023, the Bureau believes the locksmith has a personal archive of his victims, photographs, clothing, maybe even house keys as trophies, and that he may revisit scenes long after the crime is forgotten by the public. A former agent, speaking anonymously, claimed that one of the Amarillo victims' locks had been tampered with not just once, but 3 separate times in the 6 months leading up to the murders, meaning the killer had entered their home undetected at least twice before the night he killed them. They were being watched, monitored, and he was rehearsing. That chilling theory rewired the investigation from a manhunt into a surveillance war. Because if the locksmith is watching his victims beforehand, he's likely capturing more than just their routines. He's learning their silences, their fears, their vulnerabilities. He's inserting himself into their lives before ending them, and he's erasing all trace of his own. The FBI has cross-checked over 2,000 locksmith licenses, home repair contractors, HVAC specialists, and prison systems employees with no match. Facial recognition has turned up nothing. Every piece of DNA evidence lifted from the crime scenes either doesn't exist or appears to be scrubbed. Even the paper he leaves behind, the graphite symbol, has been chemically altered to resist fingerprint lifting. No handwriting analysts have been able to definitively identify a match. It's like he studied how not to get caught before his first kill. The Bureau has a secret theory they don't discuss publicly, that the locksmith is a former insider, not just a former cop or contractor, but someone from within their own system, someone who once trained in security protocols, someone who knows exactly how the investigation works and how to stay one step ahead. It's the only way they can explain the level of discipline and silence he operates with. He doesn't kill impulsively. He kills when everything aligns, and the longer he goes without being caught, the more surgical he becomes. In 2022, a woman in Sioux Falls reported waking up at 3:14 a.m. to find her hallway light on and her front door unlocked, despite triple latching it the night before. She found no one in the house, but her son's bedroom window had been partially unlatched. The police dismissed it as a home wiring issue, but 3 weeks later, the family next door was found murdered in their sleep. It was the same pattern, and the same hollow graphite key folded under the living room rug. That woman hasn't spoken to press since, but her home is now under 24-hour surveillance, monitored by a private team the FBI won't acknowledge. They believe the locksmith might have been testing her home and changed course, or he might be waiting. That's the terror in this case. There's no timeline, no pattern you can rely on. He doesn't chase fame. He doesn't claim credit. He doesn't kill to make a point. He kills because something inside him demands perfection, controlled entry, controlled exit, controlled silence. And while the FBI quietly runs advanced behavioral simulations to try and corner his psychology, the truth is simpler and more horrifying. He's not making mistakes. He's refining, and he's still out there, somewhere behind another lock. If the locksmith was a ghost who disappeared into locked silence, then the next name on the FBI's list is a conductor of chaos, a killer who doesn't hide in the shadows but performs in the open, leaving behind a show so grotesque it feels staged. They call him the organist. He's not a musician. He doesn't play keys or compose melodies. His name comes from something far more literal. He removes organs, and he arranges them like notes in a score. The first time he struck, it was written off as a gang killing gone wrong. The body of a young man, 26 years old, no criminal record, was found inside an abandoned Baptist church in rural Alabama, laid out on the altar, shirtless, with his chest opened and hollowed. What alarmed the medical examiner wasn't just the precision of the removal, but what he did with the rest. The victim's heart had been placed on the church organ, its valves tied with fishing wire, its chambers filled with salt, and beside it, a single page of sheet music soaked in blood, a hymn called "Be Still My Soul." The church had been decommissioned for 12 years, no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, no DNA. The cameras in the town had been disabled 48 hours before the kill. The power grid, partially shut down. No one saw a thing. The FBI called it a one-off, a twisted symbolism case. But then it happened again. A woman in Lubbock, Texas, found on a college campus stage, lungs placed atop a broken metronome surrounded by votive candles with the sheet music of "Amazing Grace" shredded across the floor. Another in Scranton, Pennsylvania, her liver nailed to the pews of a collapsed synagogue, a children's choir robe folded neatly beneath her head. Each victim had a different organ missing. Each scene had been staged. Each crime happened on a Sunday before dawn. That's when it clicked. The organist doesn't kill randomly. He performs. The FBI's analysis suggests a background in surgical fields or mortuary sciences. But what haunts investigators is his obsession with symbolism. In every crime scene, he leaves behind altered hymns, sometimes rewritten in Latin, sometimes burnt into wood, and always marked with one phrase: "Reverence is dead." Agents believe he sees his killings as a form of protest, not political, but spiritual. His victims, so far, appear to have had no connection to religion at all. They were students, nurses, mechanics, often found far from their homes, often lured to the site of their death by an unknown job posting, audition, or tutoring request. He uses public job boards and fake music academy listings to trap them. In at least one case, a woman named Rachel Mann disappeared after responding to a Craigslist ad titled "Lead Vocalist for Sacred Requiem." Her remains were never found. But 2 weeks later, a blood-soaked hymnal appeared in a UPS drop box in Asheville, North Carolina, addressed to the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Inside the hymnal, strands of her hair stitched into the binding like thread. The Bureau has reason to believe he travels across state lines in a converted church van, a white 1999 Ford Econoline with blacked-out windows and the words "Blessed be the silence" stenciled on the back. 3 separate witnesses across Kansas and Missouri have reported seeing the same van parked near abandoned chapels. But by the time authorities arrive, the van is gone. What makes the organist especially disturbing isn't just his surgical precision or religious mockery, it's his calm. One gas station attendant in Topeka said a man matching his description calmly bought a fountain drink and asked for directions to the nearest chapel. He was clean, smelled like bleach, polite, said God bless surveillance footage was corrupted, cameras glitched, another anomaly. The FBI now classifies him as a level 5 signature killer, meaning his crimes are not just ritualistic, but evolving. He hasn't repeated the same organ twice. He hasn't revisited the same state. He hasn't left a single trace of his actual name. And yet, with every kill, his message grows louder. Silence the sacred, butcher the familiar, and rebuild reverence with blood and keys. Some agents believe he's targeting the concept of divinity itself, that he's playing God by removing the body's instruments one by one. Others think he's preparing for something larger, a final performance, one that will make all the others look like rehearsals. And that's what keeps the Bureau awake at night. Because killers like this don't burn out. They crescendo. The FBI's internal profiler assigned to the organist, a veteran agent named Elaine Waters, wrote in her now classified psychological memo that the killer displays a level of thematic fixation unlike anything she's seen in 20 years. She noted how the organist isn't just obsessed with organs. He's constructing a theological symphony with each crime, placing the body's instruments where sacred ones once were. His kills are not just rituals. They're acts of desecration, rewiring reverence into revulsion. The victims are rarely killed in public. They vanish quietly, usually after accepting a harmless gig, a music lesson, a choir practice, an amateur production. The body is always found in a sacred or sacred-adjacent space, reimagined as an altar. And that's what's sending panic across faith communities in the Midwest and South. Hundreds of churches have upgraded their locks. Choir groups have shut down. Small towns now patrol abandoned chapels as if they were crime scenes waiting to happen. Because with the organist, it's not just about who he kills. It's about the story he tells with their remains. Every time he strikes, he escalates. One more instrument removed, one more twisted hymn, one more van reappearance like a ghost returning to a former stage. The FBI believes he may be working toward a final act, some climactic mass ritual involving multiple victims. They found blueprints in a burned-out church in Oklahoma depicting a stage with 5 marked positions, each labeled with an organ name, each traced in blood. The DNA was burned beyond analysis, but the signature was clear. "Reverence is dead" was carved into the baptismal font, and next to it, the final line of a hymn that doesn't exist in any known hymnal. When the 5th key bleeds, the choir will stop singing. What that means, no one knows. But if the pattern holds, the organist is waiting for something. Perhaps a date, a sacred event, a location that fits his final masterpiece. Several agents believe he may be modeling his timeline after a distorted version of Lent or another religious calendar. Others think it's all a smokescreen, that the religious overtones are distractions and the real motive is deeply personal. Childhood trauma, a former choir boy turned killer, a failed composer lashing out at rejection. But if it is personal, it's also infinitely patient. One victim's family in Ohio received a postcard 6 months after their daughter's murder. It was blank, except for a single word: Encore. No fingerprints, no postage. It had been hand-delivered. When agents visited the church where her body had been found, they noticed something chilling. The hymnals had been rearranged, not taken, just reordered, alphabetically, backwards, except for one missing book. Whoever the organist is, he returns. He revisits his stages like an artist admiring his own work. The public doesn't know this. The FBI won't admit it publicly. But internally, they've placed him on a level 9 fugitive alert, the same category once reserved for domestic terrorists. There's a growing fear he might not stop at performance pieces, that his next kill won't be solitary, but orchestral, multiple victims, a live audience. And with every Sunday that passes, agents wait for the next note, the next instrument, the next body hollowed and placed in reverent silence. Because the organist doesn't make mistakes, he tunes them. While the locksmith hides behind precision and the organist hides behind ritual, the hollow man hides behind something even darker: identity itself. No one knows his real name. No one knows his real face. The only thing the FBI can confirm is that every time he appears, someone vanishes, not just physically, but emotionally, legally, and socially erased, as if they never existed. His first known victim was a 62-year-old woman in Eugene, Oregon, named Martha Klemper, a retired schoolteacher with no enemies, no debt, no mental health issues. She vanished in late 2014 after emailing her daughter to say she had a new tenant moving into the basement unit she was renting. The tenant paid cash, had glowing references, and claimed to be a traveling speech therapist. He was soft-spoken, well-dressed, intelligent. In her final voicemail, Martha called him charming, very polite, like someone from a Hallmark movie. Within 3 days, she was gone. Her phone disconnected. Her daughter flew in from out of state and found the house empty. No signs of struggle, no blood, no valuables missing. But in the basement, a folding chair, a sealed can of red paint, and a Polaroid photograph were left behind. An image of Martha, smiling faintly, standing in her own kitchen, but with a strange detail. The photograph was taken from behind her, facing a mirror. Her eyes were looking away, but the figure behind the camera was nowhere to be seen. Just her, alone. Her body was never found. Police assumed she wandered off, early dementia. But then it happened again, and again. And each time the pattern was the same. A man, name varies, background changes, references always forged, moves into someone's life under the guise of normalcy. A tenant, a roommate, a visiting nephew, always someone you'd invite in, someone who earns trust quickly. Within 72 hours of his arrival, the homeowner disappears, gone without trace. In Billings, Montana, he posed as a hospice care assistant and lived with a dying man for 4 days. The patient's nurse said he was incredible, calming, spiritual, like a monk. On the 5th day, both men were gone. The nurse's station smelled of paint thinner. On the floor, a sketchbook filled with pencil drawings of eyes. Hundreds of them, all open, all staring. The killer leaves behind objects instead of messages, things that seem normal at first glance until you realize they don't belong. A child's sock in a home with no children. A piece of chewed gum stuck under a doorknob. An open journal with the first 2 pages missing and the rest blank. One house in Nevada had a fire extinguisher that wasn't purchased by the family, and inside it, rolled up tightly, was a page from a 1996 obituary about a different woman who had also gone missing, never found. The FBI has tracked at least 11 disappearances now connected to the Hollow Man. Each one began with an interview, someone answering a roommate or tenant ad. Each one ended with a life quietly deleted. And no 2 witnesses have ever described the man the same way. Some say he was white, others Latino. Some swear he had blue eyes, others green. Some described a limp, a stutter, a laugh that felt hollow, hence the name. But surveillance footage, where it exists, only deepens the mystery. In every instance where security cameras might have captured him, apartment building lobbies, ATM machines, gas stations, the footage was glitched, overexposed, or corrupted, not erased, distorted. One digital forensics expert from Quantico said the data corruption was artificial, as if someone had replaced the footage with visual static layered over false movement. That level of manipulation requires advanced knowledge of video forensics, encryption, and live feed intercepts. Meaning, the Hollow Man isn't just some drifter, he's someone trained, someone technical. But more terrifying than his skills is his psychology. The Bureau's profile paints him as a chameleon sociopath, someone who constructs temporary identities the way most people build IKEA furniture, not just using fake names, but embodying entire personas, accent, history, behavior, belief systems. One neighbor described him as obsessed with crossword puzzles. Another said he spent hours in the garden naming flowers. A third said he cried during a soap opera. The FBI suspects he studies his victims' expectations and becomes what they want: the ideal houseguest, the perfect listener, the reliable helper. And then, when the moment comes, he doesn't kill out of rage. He removes, he edits, and the person is gone. Even more disturbing, some of his victims are believed to still be alive, but changed. There are 3 people in witness protection who've claimed, under sedation and hypnosis, to remember a man in the walls or a voice behind the mirror. One woman even drew a sketch of a man's face split down the middle, one side smiling, the other completely blank. The Bureau is currently investigating the theory that the Hollow Man may be psychologically breaking his victims rather than killing them, erasing their sense of identity before removing them from society, which is why they've never turned up. Not dead, not missing, just unrecognizable. And if that's true, it makes him more dangerous than any killer they've faced, because he doesn't need to bury bodies, he buries belief. His own FBI wanted poster simply says, "Unknown male, age range 30 to 50, alias prolific. Do not approach, do not engage. He will become who you need." And that's the scariest part. Because what if the next person you trust, The one with the resume, the smile, the steady voice, isn't someone at all. What if he's hollow? The hollow man wasn't always considered a serial killer. In fact, for nearly a decade, the FBI categorized his early cases under involuntary disappearances. That's how convincing his manipulations were. When a person vanishes and there's no blood, no struggle, no forced entry, just silence and one strange artifact left behind, it's easier for authorities to write it off as an adult who chose to walk away. But patterns have a way of whispering louder than evidence, and when whispers reach the right ears, someone listens. In 2019, an analyst named Corey Ramirez, working late in a side room of the missing persons behavioral unit, noticed something buried in two unrelated files. A phrase, not in handwriting, not in a message, but in the metadata of two different smartphones recovered from unrelated victims who had gone missing 5 years apart. The phrase, "He sat in the chair like it was his house," that exact wording. In both digital diaries, one from a woman in Portland, one from a man in Tulsa. Both had written about their new tenant, how charming he was, how helpful, how he sat in the chair like it was his house. The phrase stuck with Corey. He dug deeper. Within 6 months, he'd uncovered 5 other cases, scattered across the country, with eerily similar notes. All were unrelated on the surface. Different demographics, different states, different years. But every single victim had allowed a man into their life for some short-term arrangement, a tenant, a helper, a visiting friend of a friend, and all vanished without a trace. No bodies, no signs of struggle, only silence and small details that didn't belong. A rotary phone in a house with no landline, a set of old car keys with no matching vehicle, a toothbrush made of bone. The hollow man doesn't just erase people, he implants confusion. Investigators now believe he creates artificial memories by manipulating routine, subtly changing objects in the home, adjusting clocks, moving items slightly out of place until the victim begins questioning reality itself. One surviving witness, now institutionalized in a facility under FBI protection, described how he made the air feel different. She said that within days of his arrival, the mirrors fogged without steam. The clocks ticked louder. Her cat wouldn't enter the room he sat in, and he would never look away, not once, while she was in the room. The same woman claimed she found a page from a book she didn't own under her pillow. The page was blank, except for the words, "You were meant to go missing." The hollow man's tactics go beyond killing. He breaks identity first. The FBI now believes he may induce psychological paralysis in his victims by creating a cocoon of silence and uncertainty, gaslighting them into isolation until they begin to feel invisible. Then he takes them. But how? How does someone extract a full-grown adult with no noise, no trace, no sign of entry or exit? The Bureau suspects he drugs them, not with traditional sedatives, but with something rarer, more subtle. There have been trace elements of scopolamine, known as the devil's breath, found in air samples and fabrics at 2 scenes. It's a compound used in South America to erase memory and suppress free will. A person under its influence becomes compliant, unable to form new memories. If the hollow man is using this, it would explain how his victims go quietly, how neighbors never hear a thing, how no one sees the moment of disappearance, because the victim doesn't even know they're being erased. But what truly terrifies the FBI is the possibility that he's not working alone. In one case, a man named Ellis Brandt vanished from his apartment in Boise, Idaho. Police found a wine bottle and 2 glasses in the kitchen, but Ellis was single. No known visitors. More chilling, his security camera footage showed no one entering or exiting the building for 48 hours. But the feed did show something else, a frame skip. At 2:14 a.m., the feed cut out for exactly 8 seconds, then resumed. And in that 8-second gap, Ellis was gone. Gone from his chair, his drink untouched, his phone still charging on the wall. The FBI's cyber team believes the footage was tampered with in real time, meaning someone on site or someone with live remote access edited the footage as the crime occurred. That level of interference requires tools used by intelligence agencies, not average criminals. The implication? The Hollow Man is either a former government agent or is working with one. One theory being quietly passed around Quantico is that he's an experiment gone rogue, a failed psychological warfare subject, someone trained in blending in, erasing targets, and destroying memory. But that would mean someone built him, and now they've lost control. Another theory, even darker, suggests he's building a network, that every person he's taken is being conditioned into something else, a mirror of himself. The FBI has reviewed sightings of people matching his MO in cities where he shouldn't be. Same behavior, same objects left behind, but too far apart in time and space for one man to cover. What if there are multiple Hollow Men now? What if his goal is replication, not fame, not terror, but disappearance itself, spreading invisibility like a virus? The Bureau is tracking patterns. They've created an algorithm to detect similar cases in real time. And in the last 12 months alone, the system has flagged 18 potential incidents, all with vanishing adults, all with false names, all with polite new tenants. But when agents arrive, they find nothing. The homes are too clean, the scenes too calm. It's like chasing a ghost who knows when you're coming. And that's why, in 2024, the FBI elevated him to Priority 1 domestic fugitive, placing him on the internal tier just beneath known terrorist threats. Yet they won't admit it publicly. Why? Because no agency wants to admit they're losing to a man who doesn't even exist on paper. There are no fingerprints, no known aliases, not a single confirmed image, just sketches, descriptions, and a feeling left behind like the smell of bleach in an empty room. When people ask, "What does he want?" the profilers don't have a real answer, but one of them, a linguist named Barrett, said something that still haunts the investigation. He wants to prove that existence is optional, that if you lose everything, name, face, records, relationships, you become something else, not dead, not missing, just blank. That's the Hollow Man. He doesn't want headlines. He doesn't leave messages. He doesn't kill for thrill. He erases for philosophy. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the country, he's reading this file too. You don't find the bone collector. You drive past him. You pass his truck at a blinking light. You fuel up at the same gas station where he just wiped his prints off a handle. You cross his trail without knowing it, until years later, when someone finds a single human jawbone in a soybean field 60 miles from where the victim was last seen. And even then, it doesn't feel like discovery. It feels like a warning. Route 72, cutting through Illinois, Iowa, and Nebraska, is the spine of his hunting ground. A stretch of lonely pavement framed by corn stalks, forgotten barns, and mile markers rusted beyond legibility. It's where towns shrink, signal dies, and truck stops feel like holding cells. Since 1998, 34 sets of partial human remains have been uncovered within a 6-mile radius of Route 72. Most are incomplete, often a single rib, a foot, a piece of vertebra fused into an old fence post. Some are scattered across county lines, dumped in places where animals and time do the rest. But the bone fragments all share two things in common: surgical precision and polish. The FBI's forensic anthropologists confirmed that the cuts made on the remains were not from saws or knives, but customized bone tools, sharpened femurs, reinforced humerus splinters, and restructured vertebrae with jagged edges, meaning the killer is using his victims' bones to dissect other victims. A toolmaker, an archivist, a collector, and somewhere, this person, this thing, is keeping the rest. Police didn't connect the first wave of disappearances until a fourth body turned up in Cass County, Iowa, with the same chemical trace of formaldehyde embedded in the marrow. That suggested refrigeration, preservation, but the remains had no DNA. Everything had been soaked, stripped, and sealed, like a museum exhibit. When the fifth set of bones surfaced, it came with a message, not a note, but an arrangement. Vertebrae stacked vertically in a tree, like a spine returning to heaven. The discovery launched a multi-agency task force and triggered the FBI to officially name the killer, the Bone Collector of Route 72. The nickname wasn't for drama, it was descriptive. Every recovered bone had been polished smooth, then carved. Some bore symbols, crude versions of runes, animal figures, and strange geometric patterns resembling crop circles. One victim's femur had the outline of the Route 72 highway etched along its side, like a signature. But the bone collector doesn't seek credit. He doesn't taunt. There are no letters, no media games, no ransom notes, just bones, and always in places people don't visit until harvest or hunting season. That's what makes him so impossible to predict. He's not operating on a schedule. He doesn't need to. He has the whole Midwest, and he knows it better than law enforcement ever will. One retired trooper who searched for a missing 19-year-old girl for 4 months in 2020 told the FBI, "We didn't miss him. He passed through our town before we knew she was gone." The girl's tibia was later found in a taxidermy freezer behind a closed bait shop. She was never reported missing by name because she was a runaway. That's the killer's pattern: transient targets, runaways, migrant workers, solo travelers. Those who won't be searched for, or won't be found if they are. In 2022, a rare break came. A burned-out truck, abandoned in Monroe County, Illinois, contained a false floor smeared with formaldehyde and tiny specks of calcium dust. Fingerprints wiped. VIN number removed. But wedged inside the cab's ventilation unit was a single human tooth, capped in gold. That tooth belonged to a 38-year-old drifter named Tony Ray Hollins, last seen hitchhiking near Davenport. DNA confirmed it, but nothing else in the truck matched him. Not the clothes, not the food receipts, not the driving routes on the GPS. This truck had been used for multiple victims and discarded like everything else. Since then, sightings have surged. Dozens of people have reported seeing a tall man with sun-bleached jeans, a gray thermal shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat walking along country roads. Some say he drives a rust-colored Ford. Others describe a tan RV with blacked-out windows. But no image has ever been captured. The FBI's best guess: he lives completely off-grid, maybe underground, maybe mobile, constantly shifting. He might be a former butcher, a veterinarian, or someone with medical training. The cuts are too precise, the preservation methods too advanced. One theory suggests he works, or once worked, in agricultural meat processing, giving him access to freezers, solvents, and the tools needed to dissect large bodies without alerting suspicion. But even that doesn't explain the symbols, or the carvings, or the arrangement. Because the bone collector isn't just killing, he's telling a story. FBI profiler Lucia Margrave believes he's creating a map, that each bone, each symbol, is part of a larger sequence, a ritual across land. She's overlaid the discovery points across Route 72 and noticed something chilling. They trace an image. Not perfectly, but eerily enough. A shape resembling a human spine stretched across 3 states. That's when the FBI began searching barns, silos, and underground storage facilities along the route, hoping to find a collection site, a final lair. But all they found were more bones. In one case, tucked behind hay bales inside an abandoned dairy barn, agents found 117 human phalanges, all from different people, strung together like a necklace. The local sheriff who witnessed it resigned 2 weeks later. "He's not just hiding," said Agent Margrave. "He's sculpting. He's building something none of us are meant to see until he decides to finish it." And with each year, the pieces grow, the Midwest becomes a body, and the bone collector walks its spine. The closest the FBI ever got to the bone collector was in late 2023, when a tip came in from a retired farmhand named Edgar Bales. Edgar had lived off Route 72 for over 40 years and kept mostly to himself, but after a bout of winter pneumonia, his son convinced him to move in temporarily. That's when Edgar confessed something strange. Not a crime, not a memory, but a pattern. For the last 5 winters, without fail, Edgar said he would find animal bones piled behind the old ice house on his neighbor's abandoned property. He assumed it was coyotes or local kids messing around, but one winter he saw something that didn't make sense. A man, tall, wide-shouldered, wearing a butcher's apron and knee-high boots, emerged from the trees carrying a bundle wrapped in tarp. Edgar only saw him for a second, but what disturbed him wasn't what the man carried. It was how quiet he moved. No crunch in the snow, no breath in the air. Edgar said the man walked like he wasn't made of anything. The FBI took the tip seriously. Within 48 hours, a forensic excavation team arrived at the old ice house, a structure used before electric refrigeration, now half collapsed and surrounded by overgrowth. What they found inside shifted the entire case. The floor, once stone, had been lifted and replaced with wood panels. Beneath it, a crawl space less than 4 feet tall, covered with black tarp and lined with cold packs, dry ice remnants, and fiberglass insulation. But the real horror came when they peeled back the second layer. Over 200 human bones, not buried, not scattered, arranged neatly like a library. Each was marked with a tiny carved symbol and numbered. Femurs in one section, jawbones in another, phalanges stacked like twigs, vertebrae labeled with tiny ink dots. But the most terrifying part was the map. On the ceiling, pinned with brass tacks and deer sinew, was a topographical layout of Route 72, 3 full states drawn by hand on butcher paper, and on that map were tiny X's, 67 in total, many corresponding to known dump sites. But 11 were new. The agents were silent. Then one whispered, "He's not dumping them. He's staging them." The press never heard about the ice house. The FBI sealed the site and swore the farmhand to silence with a fabricated story about historic remains. But internally, panic surged. What they thought were the killer's random dump zones were actually installations. This wasn't just body disposal. This was a project, a plan, something that only made sense to the killer and likely wouldn't make sense to anyone else until it was finished. One carved femur was sent to the FBI's behavioral lab in Quantico for analysis. Under magnification, they discovered something no one expected. A microscopic grid of etched lines, almost like fingerprints but too orderly, like circuitry. Not natural wear, not age, man-made, but made with what? Bone-on-bone carving doesn't allow for such detail. That's when the FBI began to consider a new possibility. The bone collector wasn't alone. He may be using tools built for him, or he may be operating with access to lab-grade equipment, possibly stolen from a university, a pathology center, or even a private contractor with dark government ties. An entire sub-task force was created to explore missing surgical tools and black market preservative materials. Meanwhile, the symbols found on his bone art were sent to linguists, ancient history professors, and even Navajo code experts. The most recurring glyph resembled a circle split into quarters, with a line radiating outward like a spinal nerve. Some said it resembled neurological mapping, others a medieval alchemical diagram. But one expert in ancient medical texts said it matched a 17th century symbol for preservation of the soul through separation of flesh. That's when the psychological profile changed. No longer was the bone collector seen as just a rural hunter. He became something else, a theorist, a man attempting to rewrite the relationship between body and meaning. A murderer using anatomy not just for death, but to tell something, to express or prove something with bodies the way an artist uses color. And yet, no matter how horrifying his methods, he remains invisible. Despite the ice house, despite the bones, despite multiple overlapping evidence trails, no fingerprints, no DNA, no fibers have been found that link to any known identity. Even the boot prints around the dump sites are inconsistent. Some match size 10.5, others 12. One pair had a heel drag consistent with a limp, but in a different direction each time, which led some to believe he may be switching footwear deliberately, creating false physical profiles to throw off pursuit. And then came the audio tape, a wildlife. Conservationists testing deer migration in rural Nebraska set up remote sound recorders along a heavily wooded stretch of Route 72 in early spring. These devices are triggered by motion and capture environmental sounds. One of them, tagged Unit 0027, recorded a 47-second file that has never been released to the public. What it captured was a hollow, rhythmic knocking, like bone tapping wood. Then a pause. Then a voice, not shouting, not whispering, just stating, "No one looks beneath the trees anymore, but the bones do." The voice was raspy, neutral, unidentifiable by accent. But what chilled agents wasn't what was said, it was how close it sounded, as if the speaker was right up against the device. But there were no tracks, no signs of approach or departure, just the voice, and then silence. The recording is now classified, but internally, some agents refuse to listen to it a second time. One profiler reportedly left the case after reviewing it, saying only, "He's not hiding, he's waiting." The 11 new map markers from the ice house are being investigated in secret. Drones have been deployed, ground-penetrating radar is being used, but so far, nothing has been found. And that's what makes the bone collector different. Most serial killers kill for need, control, revenge, compulsion. He kills for meaning. And no matter how close the FBI comes, every piece of evidence only makes the mystery bigger. Every bone is a comma, not a period. And Route 72 stretches endlessly forward, a sentence still being written in marrow and silence. Some killers get caught because they scream too loud, others because they slip up and speak. But the silent one does neither. He doesn't shout, he doesn't confess, he doesn't even leave fingerprints, because there are no doors he ever seems to touch. The FBI doesn't know his real name. They don't know where he was born, where he sleeps, or even what he sounds like. Because in 23 confirmed murders across 10 cities, all unsolved, all believed to be connected, not a single neighbor, bystander, or security camera has ever captured so much as a footstep. Not a single scream, not a window shattered, nothing but silence, and a body that appears to have simply stopped living. The silent one doesn't kill with force. There are no strangulations, stabbings, or gunshots. The victims don't bleed, they don't resist, they aren't found tied or bruised or broken. They are always found the same way, seated upright, eyes closed, hands resting in their lap, lips slightly parted, like someone mid-breath or mid-thought. On autopsy, every victim is recorded with acute cardiac failure or unexplained neural collapse, but the heart isn't damaged. The lungs are untouched, the brain shows no visible trauma, but under extreme forensic scanning, particularly MRI neuroimaging, there's one anomaly, a complete electrical shutdown of the brainstem, like someone flipped the switch at the base of their nervous system and the rest just stopped. The FBI initially believed the first few cases were elaborate poisonings. The first victim was a 41-year-old math professor in Seattle, found sitting at his desk with a half-written proof still fresh in his hand. No signs of forced entry, nothing stolen. Coffee cup beside him still warm. He had emailed a colleague 6 minutes before death. The second was a woman in Chicago, a violinist who was mid-lesson on a Zoom call. At exactly 3:18 p.m., her head tilted gently to the side. She didn't slump, didn't convulse, Her student waited in silence for 5 minutes before calling for help. The camera never captured anyone else. The door remained locked from the inside. Medical examiners ruled both deaths as natural causes until the third body appeared, and the fourth, and the fifth, all different cities, all different ages, but the same posture, the same unnatural calm. That's when Agent Riley Hendricks of the Behavioral Analysis Unit first coined the name the Silent One. She wasn't referring to his method, she was referring to the aftermath. "There is no noise," she said. "No sign of fear, no defensive wounds. These people didn't fight, they didn't even know." The FBI created a private cluster of these cases under Operation Null, not publicly labeled as serial, but quietly investigated as such. They looked for chemical triggers, neurotoxins, rare disorders. But the odds of that many unrelated people, all otherwise healthy, suddenly dying in identical posture with no trauma across a 7-year period, statistically impossible. One anomaly stood out. In 17 of the 23 cases, a small audio device was found nearby, usually a white noise machine, an electric metronome, or a meditation speaker. Nothing suspicious, except that all of them had been activated and all of them had been playing at exactly 432 Hz, a frequency often associated with calming the body. Acoustic neuroscientists confirmed that while 432 Hz isn't lethal, prolonged exposure, especially in specific wave patterns, can affect the vagus nerve, which controls unconscious systems like heart rate and digestion. But even that wasn't enough to kill, not unless paired with something else, something no one could find. One theory was electromagnetic pulses, targeted EMF weapons that short-circuit neural activity. But no EMF evidence was ever found at the scenes, no damage to electronics, no interference recorded. Another theory: the killer had access to infrasound technology, sound below the threshold of human hearing but capable of inducing anxiety, paralysis, or hallucinations. But that would require industrial-grade equipment, and none was detected. Then came the first clue, or what they thought was a clue. In a Boston apartment, the 12th confirmed victim was found in his armchair, eyes closed, chin lifted slightly. On the table next to him, a single sticky note with one word, handwritten in red ink: "Still." At first, agents believed it might be suicide. But again, no trauma, no drugs, no toxins, just the same eerie shutdown of the brainstem, as if something had touched the exact nerve at the exact second and quietly disconnected him from himself. That sticky note was tested, no fingerprints. The pen ink was common, the paper off-brand generic. But under infrared light, a second word appeared beneath it, erased so faintly. It took weeks to notice. "Listen." That's when they realized the sticky note wasn't a message to them. It was a trigger, or a reminder, something ritualistic, not for the public, but for the killer himself. Investigators dug through hundreds of hours of surveillance footage near the victim's apartment. They found one camera angled toward a street lamp across from the building. Between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., the footage flickered twice. In the third frame after the flicker, a shadow appeared at the edge of the frame, not clear, just enough to register a blur. A human silhouette, lean, motionless. It stood for 9 seconds, then disappeared. FBI techs enhanced the image frame by frame. No features, no movement, but oddly, no reflection from surrounding light. The figure absorbed illumination like matte paint. It was the only physical trace they've ever caught. Since then, the FBI has flagged every unexplained death with similar posture or brain shutdown. They've found 3 more, all with audio sources set to 432 Hz, and all with no forced entry, no noise, no resistance. That's why they believe the Silent One doesn't break in. He's invited. He enters when expected, when welcomed, when the victim is at peace. And then, something happens. Something just out of reach of the body's alarms. A vibration, a word, a breath, something that makes the nervous system give up. The BAU now believes the killer may be experimenting with learned paralysis, training his victims into a suggestive state through weeks of gentle influence, audio frequencies, sleep hypnosis, repetition, even manipulation via phone or online contact. Meaning, he could be talking to them for weeks before death. He could be inside their circle, their life, their inbox, their playlists. That's the most terrifying part. Because if the silent one doesn't kill like a murderer, then how do you stop him? If he doesn't force his way in, doesn't leave a scar, doesn't shatter the room, then what evidence do you hold? What door do you lock? The last confirmed victim died in Phoenix, Arizona on May 3, 2024. A 33-year-old therapist. She was found at her desk, white noise machine humming. Her phone showed a voice message had played moments before her death, length 9 seconds. But the file had been erased. Her screen showed only the title, Breathe.wave. The phone carrier confirmed the message had originated from a burner number, active for 72 hours before death. The silent one hasn't messaged since, but the fear remains, not of death, but of not hearing it coming. Every city has its rules, every map has its lines, but the killers we just walked through, these 5 phantoms still hunted by the FBI, have something in common far deeper than their crimes. They don't just break laws, they bend reality. They strip away the rules we thought protected us, tear through the routines that made us feel safe, and leave behind something far worse than blood. They leave absence of logic, absence of answers, absence of closure. The chalk maker doesn't just kill with chalk. He kills with calculation, scripting his murders into perfect, unsolvable riddles, leaving behind only shapes and grief that loops like geometry. The organist doesn't kill at random. He curates death, builds his murders like stained glass windows made of flesh. His violence is sacred, ritualized, choreographed like a requiem the world wasn't meant to hear. And then there's the Crimson Shepherd, who walks among the masses, blending into protests, riots, movement, anger. He uses our emotions as weapons, turns the cries of the innocent into camouflage for slaughter, and vanishes into the crowd like a ghost with a cause. The bone collector of Route 72, by contrast, doesn't hide in noise, he hides in pattern. He builds cathedrals of bone beneath forgotten barns, mapping death like a cartographer of rot. He doesn't just take lives, he reorders them into something he believes is eternal. And the silent one, the most terrifying of all, kills without force, without struggle, without ever being seen. A whisper, a frequency, a shutdown of the body like it chose, silently, to stop existing. 5 killers, 5 monsters, 5 cases without arrests, 5 questions the FBI cannot answer, and maybe won't. Because these men, if they're even all men, have figured something out. Not just how to evade capture, but how to weaponize our need to understand. They feed on silence, on riddles, on patterns that almost, but not quite, make sense. They build their myths carefully, like stage plays designed not just to horrify us, but to infect us. Each victim is a seed of paranoia. Each crime scene is a mirror, daring you to look too long. And the terrifying truth? We've helped them. Every documentary, every profiler interview, every podcast or Reddit thread or FBI press release, it all feeds their myth, gives them pages in a book they're still writing, because they know we'll never stop asking questions. And as long as we do, we're part of the performance. And the FBI knows this. They chase ghosts. They follow trails that vanish. They pin up photos in rooms filled with red string and still don't know where to pull. And that's what makes these 5 different from the killers we catch. We don't just fear what they've done, we fear what they haven't done yet. Because we know they're not finished. We know there are more blank chalkboards waiting, more pews to be filled, more crowds to vanish into, more maps to be marked with bones. more quiet living rooms where someone is hearing a voice they shouldn't. The Bureau keeps these files locked deep. The public sees vague headlines, unsolved, still at large, no suspects. But inside those files are things far worse, timelines that don't match, witnesses who remember too much or nothing at all, coroners who call twice because the first autopsy didn't make sense, towns that change after they're touched, choirs that disband, highways avoided, frequencies no longer broadcasted, and still, no names, no arrests, no justice. Because maybe justice doesn't apply to men who operate in silence, in shadows, in patterns only they understand. Maybe what we're chasing isn't just killers, but ideologies, belief systems dressed in blood and symbolism. The chalkmaker believes in structure, the organist in sacrifice, the crimson shepherd in chaos, the bone collector in reconstruction, and the silent one, he believes in surrender, in the possibility that death isn't taken, but given, quietly, willingly, unknowingly. So the question is no longer, where are they, or when will we catch them? The real question is, what are they trying to say? Because these aren't just murders, these are messages, sent in chalk and hymnals, in fire and femur, in static and stillness. And if we listen too closely, if we chase too hard, we might not find them. We might find ourselves standing in front of something we can't explain, a line, a silence, a doorway in our minds that wasn't there before. And maybe that's the final horror, that we're not just hunting them, we're becoming part of their design.